Imagine a bustling local cafe in the heart of Mumbai. A customer walks up to the counter and says, I need a coffee. Now, if the barista just hands them a plain, lukewarm cup of instant coffee, the customer leaves unhappy. But if the barista asks, are you in a rush or would you like to sit and enjoy a freshly brewed latte? The entire experience changes. A user story is exactly that shift in perspective. Technically, a user story is a tool used in Agile software development to capture a description of a software feature from an end user perspective. In simple words, it is just a way of documenting what someone wants, but more importantly, why they want it. Instead of writing a 1,000-page technical document that says, the system shall display a button, a user story tells a story. As a busy commuter, I want to pay for my coffee with my phone so that I don't have to carry cash. It moves the focus away from the machine and back to the human being. You've probably seen projects fail because they focus so much on the how that they forgot who they were serving. By starting with the person, we ensure we build the right thing. So, now that we've mastered the core philosophy that a user story is about the human need rather than the technical requirement, you might be wondering how we structure these stories so they don't become messy or confusing. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the classic who, what, why framework. Let's stick with our Mumbai cafe example. To make sure we never forget the goal, we use a very specific, simple formula. As a type of user, I want to goal so that benefit. Think of it as a skeleton for your project requirements. The who identifies the persona, the what identifies the action, and the why identifies the value. When you write, as a student, I want to log in so that I can see my grades, you have instantly provided more clarity than if you just wrote implement login page. Why? Because you have given the developer a motivation. If the developer knows that the student is checking grades, they might realize that the system needs to load very quickly because the student is nervous and in a hurry. You've probably seen this at the office where someone gives you a task with no context and you end up guessing what they really need. By using this framework, we eliminate the guesswork. It turns every feature into a meaningful conversation. So now that we have mastered the structure of the who, what, why framework, you might be wondering how to make sure these stories aren't just big, unmanageable piles of work. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the art of slicing stories into smaller, digestible pieces. Imagine that same student who wants to see their grades. If you try to build the entire university portal in one go, the login, the grade database, the payment system, and the professor dashboard, you will be working for months without showing the student anything. That is a recipe for disaster. In Agile, we use something called slicing. This means taking a large complex story and cutting it into small thin slices that provide immediate value. Think of it like slicing a loaf of bread. You don't need the whole loaf to make a sandwich. You just need one slice. We take the as a student I want to see my grade story and we slice it. First, we build a simple login screen. Then, we build the page that shows just the letter grades. Then, later, we add the feature to download a PDF report. Each slice is a functional piece of the project that you can show to the user and get feedback on. It keeps the team moving fast and it keeps the user feeling like they are actually getting somewhere. So now that we've mastered the necessity of breaking big stories into manageable bite-sized slices, you might be wondering how we decide if a story is actually ready to be worked on. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the definition of ready. Have you ever walked into a kitchen to start cooking only to realize you don't have the onions, the pan is dirty, and you don't even know what you are making? You can't start cooking like that. In our Agile world, we have a definition of ready. This is a set of criteria that a user story must meet before the development team starts building it. If the story is vague, if the requirements are missing, or if we don't understand the why, we don't start. We push back and ask for more information. Think of it as a checklist. Is the story clear? Do we know how to test it? Is it small enough? If the answer is no, it isn't ready. This saves the team from wasting hours of effort building something that was poorly defined. It forces us to have those crucial conversations before the code is written, not after. It's about respect. Respect for the developer's time and respect for the final product. So now that we've mastered how to ensure a story is ready for action, you might be wondering how we know when that story is officially finished and perfect. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the definition of done. This is the most common place where teams get tripped up. Imagine the chef finishes the meal, but he leaves a pile of dirty dishes, the floor is greasy, and he hasn't even plated the food. Is the meal done? Of course not. The definition of done is an agreed upon set of conditions that must be met for a user story to be considered complete and ready to be used. It might include things like the code is written, the code is tested, the documentation is updated, and the user has verified it works. It is the checklist that prevents almost finished work from piling up in the corner. You have probably seen projects at the office where someone says it's 90% done and that 90% stays for another 3 months. That happens because they don't have a strict definition of done. When the whole team agrees on what done looks like, there are no excuses, no surprises, and no unfinished business. It brings a sense of discipline to the entire team. So now that we've mastered the discipline of knowing when a story is truly finished, you might be wondering how we keep all these stories organized and visible to everyone. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is the power of the product backlog. We have talked about writing stories, slicing them, and finishing them. But where do all these stories live? They live in the product backlog. Think of the backlog as the master grocery list for your entire project. It is not a static document that you write once and hide in a drawer. It is a living, breathing list that evolves every single day. As the project goes on, you will find new stories, you will realize some are no longer important, and you will reorder them based on what provides the most value right now. A great Scrum Master knows that the backlog is the heartbeat of the team. We spend time grooming it, which is just a fancy way of saying we keep it clean, prioritized, and organized. When you look at the backlog, you should see the vision of the entire project laid out in clear human terms. We have moved from the who, what, why framework all the way to managing the entire project roadmap through our stories. You now have the tools to ensure that every single day your team is working on the most valuable, most human-centered work possible, keeping everyone aligned and moving toward a shared, successful finish line.